So with that, we'll get started in a minute. Jared, let's hear from you all about Offsite.
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet. Thanks for having us back. I'm Jared. I'm the founder and CEO of Offsite. We plan offsites and team retreats. We're fortunate to work with hundreds of primarily remote first, hybrid, distributed companies. And we've worked with companies like Remote and HubSpot and Perplexity. And we've planned offsites all over the world in probably 30 or more countries. We've saved our clients over $6 million and thousands of offsite or thousands of hours in planning offsites. So we can help you in one of two ways. The first is you can go to offsite.com, make a free account, and it's like Airbnb. So if you want to book your room block, your meeting space, food and beverage, activities, and more directly through the platform, you could save up to 50% on those transactions. Or we could do end-to-end, done for you, offsite planning, take all the stress off your plate, let you do other important things as a chief staff. And Maggie's probably going to educate you on the 17 other high priority projects that you have to do. So yeah, go to offsite.com. It would definitely help us and help Nova if you use the link that Christina's sharing in the chat, and or if you talk to us, just let us know you found us through Nova. Thanks so much, and I hope you enjoy this webinar. I hear it's the most popular one of the year.
Jared, before you come off camera, tell me how many folks again are going through offsites right now?
Yeah, I think this year we'll have close to 10,000 people that go to an offsite that our team plans. And so really, really proud of our team. Everyone that is on our team that is an offsite planner, we call them a client success lead, is a former chief of staff, a former people ops professional, or has just vast corporate events planning in their background under the likes of Zappos. And so super talented team. Like my job is to advocate about the company and build a great product. And then we got our little sales team, and then we got an amazing team of offsite planners that take care of all of our clients. So I couldn't be more grateful of our team and all the clients that are trusting us to take care of their teams when they're gathering in person. And so, yeah, thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah, we're proud of you guys. It's no small potatoes that you're doing over there. So great job, Jared. And we will dive in. Okay, a couple of things for me. Again, my name's Maggie Olson. I'm the founder of Nova Chief of Staff. If this is your first event with us, we are really happy to have you. This one is going to be a little bit more workshop style than the ones in the past. I'm going to share my screen, which I hardly ever do on these. I'm going to navigate myself. I'm going to go through some personal stories of how I was successful in my first chief of staff role. I don't get too nervous anymore talking about the chief of staff role, but I always stumble a little more when I'm talking about myself. As a true chief of staff, I'm more comfortable behind the scenes, but I've had to approach this CEO role out in the middle, out in the front here. So bear with me. I'm going to go through lots of information, and I'm going to share some tools in my deck of templates that we actually teach in the Nova Chief of Staff certification course. And I'm going to show you exactly what I built early on in my corporate chief of staff role. So before I do that, let me share a little bit about Nova Chief of Staff. We are the premier destination for chief of staff development and education. About 24 months ago now, I launched the Chief of Staff certification course, and at this point, we have over 1,200 students across 35 countries enrolled, and over 1,000 of the biggest, most influential companies trusting Nova to train their teams. We are really honored and humbled by that. We love what we do. We're really passionate about our student experience. Our course price is $1,850. There's 50 plus hours of hands-on content. We believe in a level playing field. So if you are in a financial assistance need situation, if you're at a nonprofit, like email us. We would love to work with you in some way or another. You can always reach out to us at hello@novachiefofstaff.com. And then finally, we had a special announcement today. If you're familiar with Nova, we do not go on sale. We don't do promotions. We don't really discount our course. We have one price change activity per year, and that's at the end of the year when we increase our price for next year. However, we decided to celebrate our second year birthday, which is in June, with a summer sale. So for the month of June, starting now, you can get $350 off of the Nova Chief of Staff certification course with the coupon code Summer Sale 350, and we'll put that link in the chat as well. So if you've been on the fence, this is the best time to enroll. You can start the course at any time. It's totally self-paced, and you have lifetime access. All right. Let me go ahead and switch gears a little bit and share my screen. Okay. Let's see. Can you all see me okay? Let's get some thumbs up in the chat. Perfect. All right. I'm assuming I'm a little bit small, but probably fine. Great. All right. So we're going to keep going here. I'm going to minimize the chat and just sort of take it away. Can you all still see my screen? I want to make sure we're tech good. I just moved my screen that I can see, but you all can see the slides. Perfect. Okay. Awesome. The first thing that I'm going to talk about today is kind of my story leading to the Chief of Staff role. Everybody's story to the Chief of Staff role is very, very unique. I hear often people were lifeguards, people were in the service industry, people were in sports. There's really no one path to Chief of Staff, which is what's so cool about the role. I've been a people leader for about 20 years now, and my experience has focused on customer experience, employee experience, and really the customer journey to get to purchase and the experience within a company once they're there. So I worked at companies including Nordstrom for about 5 or 6 years, and then T-Mobile, where I eventually became the Chief of Staff to the B2B leader, who was in the transition from executive vice president to president of the B2B business. There were 3 presidents at that time, so there was a lot of work to do to support him in that transition. In my Nordstrom role, my earlier years, late 20s, I was essentially a buyer. So I was on the numbers side, which technically was a buy planner, but we were responsible for figuring out what product we purchased and the timing of the product and the trends and the themes, the amount of money we could spend, the amount of marked up and marked down that we could afford, the P&L, all of it. I worked my way from kind of assistant buyer of the business to an online buyer, and then to eventually a multi-channel buyer, which is online and in stores, leading a buying office. Now Nordstrom has 80 plus buying offices for just their full price business, so not including the rack. For example, like the handbags department has 3 different buying offices for the different levels, like price points of handbags. I was in the accessories buying office, and then I was in the at-home buying office, and then I was back in a different accessories buying office, and then I was back in the at-home buying office, and then I was in like the fancy dresses buying office. And I now look back on that experience very akin to honestly preparing me for the Chief of Staff role, but also similar to consulting experience. I went into the business. I had to learn a brand new business every buying office switch. These businesses ran totally differently than each other, even though they shared cubicle walls. The margin requirements were different. The process to PO was different. The supplier count could have ranged from like 12 to 300, depending on the buying office I was in. And just like the world of that product is very, very different. Think makeup, shoes, soft accessories, like just such different businesses. I had to gain buy-in really quickly. I had to identify how the business operated, how processes worked and were set up. I had to improve the business every year. I had to lead a team, and we had to essentially ensure that our business was successful, that we were hitting margin requirements, that we were getting the markdowns and the vendor funded markdowns and the return to vendors, like all of these crazy retail things that I never knew existed in every single buying office in a brand new environment every time. I share that because you'll hear some themes over this conversation around how I approach the Chief of Staff role. And it feels very similar to how I moved around quite a bit in the Nordstrom buying offices. While I was at Nordstrom, I ended up going back to school and getting my MBA at night. I was traveling to New York 9 times a year for market trips, meeting with vendors, and then I was Skyping into class because I was in Seattle on the West Coast at the time, and having to complete my MBA while I was doing all of these things. We can get into it later, maybe in Q&A, if I think MBA is important for the chief of staff role. But it was a trying time, a lot going on, but I absolutely loved it. Post MBA, I found myself in a leaders to executive program at T-Mobile. I was recruited from my MBA program. They had identified that I had early leadership experience, and they were looking for folks to move into this executive development program at T-Mobile who had led large teams in the past and who wanted to be future company leaders. I ended up getting this role. It was pretty competitive. Only 5 folks across the country in my year were placed into this program. And I was moved from my hometown of Seattle to Salt Lake City, a place I'd never been, running a bunch of stores in a industry I'd never worked in, telecom. I led a district of like 11 stores and about 100 people, and I had to improve my business every month, every quarter, and I had to present my business every quarter to business leaders in order to really stay in the program. Thankfully, I did a decent job in that role, and the next rotation in this development program usually was a call center rotation where you led a call center for a year. I ended up moving back to corporate and taking on a retail strategy role, kind of thinking up and designing new store concepts and the customer experience and the human design concepts behind new stores at T-Mobile. Around this time, a couple years into my life at T-Mobile, I was back in Bellevue in Seattle at the time. I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska now. I ended up hearing about the chief of staff role. Somebody I worked with, Alice, she was moving into the chief of staff role for the CEO of the company. I didn't know what chief of staff was. I didn't know what chief of staff meant. I really looked up to Alice, and I thought that some of our skill set was similar. And I liked what I was hearing about the chief of staff role. I was hearing things like, you're driving organization across the leader's back office. You're getting things like incredibly organized, and you're preparing the leader and helping align the strategy, and you're leading special projects. And so I was hearing things that I liked. Come to find out, pretty quickly, I realized that the chief of staff role was everything I loved about my past roles and everything I was really, really good at in my past roles. Coming back to the Nordstrom example, stepping into a new business, learning it quickly, asking the right questions, generating buy-in and collaboration, and then making it better, more efficient through systems, process, problem-solving solutions. So essentially, I'd heard about this chief of staff role. One of the leaders at T-Mobile was hiring for his first chief of staff position. I talk a lot about the importance of networking into chief of staff positions, that you should spend 90+% of your time networking rather than just cold applying, because it's a very high trust role, and you really want the leader to already know you and already be thinking of you as a potential candidate for the position. I had met and chatted with many times the president that I ended up working for, because of the executive development program that I was in, gave us those opportunities to interview with them, to network and have sessions and all the things. So I ended up getting the role. It was my first chief of staff position, and it was really his first chief of staff that he'd ever had. And as I mentioned, I just fell in love with the role. I'm going to talk today about what I did really early on, what I built, what I saw, what problems I tried to solve, and then also how I built my team. So I was over about 11 months, I built and added 7 or 8 people to my chief of staff team, leading categories of our back office work, including business planning and president's engagements, employee culture, events, communications, and so on. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Last thing before I really dive into kind of the meat and the tools that I built and how I approached the role early on. I want to share what I talk about a lot in terms of the chief of staff role, which is that, and I continue to be validated by this, speaking with people from every single industry you could imagine. Um, the core purpose of the chief of staff role is the same everywhere, but the day to day can be completely different. What does that mean? My definition of a chief of staff role is the chief of staff is essentially the business leader's right hand and strategic thought partner focused on executing, organizing, and prioritizing the leader's business initiatives and driving transparency and alignment across the leadership team. The chief of staff maximizes the leader's time and exponentially increases their impact. The purpose is the same everywhere: to drive alignment across the team, to maximize the leader's time, to ensure the leader's prepared for everything they walk into, to manage the rhythm of business, but more specifically, manage the flow of information coming to that leader without them having to ask. That's a big part of the rhythm of business. Now, the day-to-day can look completely. And Jared, who actually you can find our Nova chat from several months back, and he is the chief of staff to a major football program in the country, Texas football, Texas Longhorn football. Now, you better believe that his day to day is totally different than what mine was like and what a lot of yours is like. His day to day is game day, travel, logistics of that travel, like police detail. He's even helping with some stats during the game. But when it comes down to it, the core purpose of his role is the same: to ensure that coach is prepared for everything they walk into, to maximize that coach's time, to lead major initiatives for that leader that may not have anywhere else to land, to align that leader's team. Okay, so that's what I kind of want to level set in here. The final thing I want to level set is that I'm going to go through a lot of examples. And in Nova's course, we go through a ton of hands-on practice and examples in our assignments that talk about how to solve certain problems in the day-to-day of the business. What is most important is the logic of the problem solving, not necessarily the exact problem or the template that I show you. The logic of maximizing your leader's time and adding visibility to the team and getting ahead and preparing so that you can see things clearly, recommend strategic changes, and really make the business more successful than it's been through your support. So consider kind of how I'm sharing and what I'm sharing and how it could apply to you, which will look different. Templates will look different. Tools will look different. Your brain's different than mine. Your team needs different things than mine would. So kind of apply that as I share some examples. All right. Starting out in my chief of staff role, I didn't know a lot. I didn't have a lot of resources, but I knew that I had to very, very first focus on the back office of my leader. His world. His name is Mike. His world. I needed to focus on his team, his meetings, himself, his world before, for example, I went and solved like a company platform solution for a tech problem. Sure, chiefs of staff step into those types of things, but first and foremost, as a new chief of staff, you need to solve solve for your leader's back office. All right, I am just going to check the chat here. I am seeing, yep, we're still on the home slide. I'm not sharing any slides yet. Thanks, guys. And then raise hand function, please just put any questions into the chat so they are not popping up here. Okay. All right, so I'm only sharing slides here and there to show you an example of what a template looks like. I'm not sharing like slides for this whole conversation, so just sort of know that I'll pop over to them when it makes sense. So I knew that I had to focus on the back office first, and I knew that I had to get my principal and his team organized, aligned, clear and early visibility, and prepared to make the most out of every session that my leader was involved in. Over this chat, you're going to hear themes around me building, creating, and then passing off to go solve another problem. You're going to hear themes around testing and learning. You're going to hear themes around ensuring that your materials are simple elevated, and consistent. What I am going to review today is really the what, not necessarily the how. We don't have time to go through the how. It's a 50-hour course. You can find it at novachiefofstaff.com. It's on sale right now. In our course, we dive through exactly how to use all these tools. I'm going to talk through the what. And really, the first thing that I did as a new chief of staff was document current state. I'm going to show you some slides, but that means potentially calendars, meetings, what's going on in that leader's back office so that I can understand things clearly. Leaders' back offices are chaotic. There's a lot going on, and that's never going to change. What's important is that as chiefs of staff, we have a place for everything. We can see everything clearly so that we can make future improvements to the business. Over time, that moves into recommending changes and strategic additions and new ways of doing things. But the first step as a new chief of staff that I teach is always documenting current state. A few views here. Can you all see me advancing slides now? Give me a thumbs up. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to close out a few things. Please stop using the raise hand function. We're not going to be calling on anybody during this chat. Feel free to put any questions down into the Q&A portion of the webinar. All right, I'm going to close that out. Okay, so really the first thing I did as a new chief of staff was dive into business planning. What are my core principles? What do I care most about in terms of business planning? What are my responsibilities when it comes to business planning? I really love the concept of a walking deck. If you've taken Nova's course, you know what I'm talking about. We can pop a blog into the chat for you if you're unfamiliar with the walking deck concept. But essentially, I put all of these slides into a walking deck for me as a chief of staff, and it helped me immensely in my role to have a one-stop shop for everything that I was building. I then made sure that all of my tools that I was kind of listing out, what are the components of business planning? Next, when it comes to our kind of like the visibility with documenting current state, let me make my screen a little smaller here. I wanted to first solve for some preparation needs. So I considered things like, how does the executive team make sure that they can see everything going on in the leader's back office? I created a view called a 2-week look ahead, which gave staff meeting agenda for the week, and it gave reoccurring sessions and one-off sessions that my leader was involved in for the purpose of aligning the leadership team, his direct reports, to his schedule. We also created basically a view of like the big rocks that included company big rocks. It included like a 3-month snapshot of what's happening in the business. Both of these views were really important to kind of level set, like what's even going on in this business. Now, you'll hear this a lot, but while I was the person who often created many of these templates and figured out the process and the system and the who's doing what of everything, I was not the person, and often my team was not the team who was filling these out every single day or week or month. We figured out what made the most sense for the EA to take on my team, what made the most sense in future examples for someone on the sales team to take on. We create the process, we create the system. The chief of staff needs to have the lens of everything going on. And often that means getting our hands dirty, building org charts and things. But should the chief of staff be the person maintaining the org chart every month? Probably not. Maybe in a small startup, sure. But generally, a lot of the tools I'm showing you, build it, create it, implement it, operationalize it with somebody else who owns it, and check in and make sure that it's running smoothly. And then chiefs of staff can go and solve other business problems. All right. So I just showed you 2 views, a 2-week look ahead view, a snapshot view of the major items, including company awareness across months. Now, the next views I'm going to show you are more relevant to the rhythm of business. They are detailed views of really the sessions that drive that information flow to the leader, the sessions that drive business. And these views can include what success looks like. They can include who attends. They should include the cadence and how often they're happening. it should be a view that you can sit down and look at and consider, how many sessions are we talking about last week or last month's business? How often are we looking back? How often are we looking forward, long-term planning, future state? And then how often are we focused on today's business, operational items, HR, all of those things? So a few examples of those would be, let's see. I think this was the first slide that I built, and it didn't quite solve what I needed. So I moved on to a little bit of a beefier slide that included time horizons in quarter, future strategic, looking back, who attends, all of the things. Now, of course, all of this information has been changed and updated for Nova's course and for like a little bit more broad application, but these are examples of things that are similar to what I built when I was early on in my chief of staff role. Rhythm of business, templates, and tools. I eventually also wanted to kind of look at some very simple slides of like, okay, when are we having different priorities? Like these are much simpler, much easier. We don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. There might be a template already out there that exists. This is just a simple list. Again, this might work for you. I, at one point, eventually was solving a problem that I heard my leader talk about. This is a heat map view. So of all the speaking engagements, all the all hands in our company, which ones were my leader attending? Like what was he doing? Where was he going? The reason for this is I think that I had heard my leader mention something like, I feel like I'm at John's all hands a lot, but I'm never at Carrie's. Okay, that's a problem that I want to look into. What's going on here? Our leaders' engagements, his messaging with internal company folks, employees, it's really important to make sure that his brand is invested in and is showing up where it needs to show up. So I solved a problem by creating a heat map version of where he's been over the last year and identifying gaps and kind of like holes by month of like, oh, you really never go to Craig's all hands meetings. Like, let's figure that out. And then solution for what that could look like in future planning using a similar template. All right. Another example of a kind of a business planning problem that I solved was early on, my principal mentioned that he felt like he was having way too many one-on-ones and not spending enough time on strategy, which people on the phone, they're like, in this call, they're, yeah, of course, like that's going to be a problem. Let's dive into that and figure it out. For this example, we actually have a tool that you all can find. I am not sharing that screen right now. Let me see if I can switch that up. Here we go. Where is it? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing real quick and then I'll show you. Stop sharing. We have a tool. Share screen. All right, you all can see my screen. Make sure. All right, I think I'm getting some yeses probably. Getting some yeses, perfect, thank you. We have a tool in Nova's resource library. We'll pop that information into the chat that talks through exactly how to do this CEO time audit that I'm referring to here. So essentially what I did was export all of my leaders' calendar items, and then I categorized them. And this talks to you a little bit about how to do that, what to think about, how to export if you're using Outlook. But essentially, I categorized into a number of different areas like team one-on-ones, strategy, operational meetings, looking back, leadership team meetings. And then I built a really simple graph and looked to see how much time my leader was spending with what categories of work. And from there, that's when the strategic impact of the chief of staff really can come about, which is like, I hear you saying this. Here's the problem I'm going to help you solve. We need to change your activities. I recommend X, Y, and Z. This type of analysis can be done now with a lot of the AI calendar tools that are out there, but this is a manual way to do it as well if you're not using one from a couple years ago that I did. And then you make strategic recommendations for exactly how to improve the business. So you'll see that example if you go to Nova's resource library. All right, I'm going to go back to the other screen. A few more examples to show you here. All right, can I get a thumbs up? You can see the rhythm of business slide again. This is my love language. Great. Glad you guys are liking that time analysis. Cool. Okay, perfect. All right. And okay, so that's the leader time analysis approach. Essentially, I ended up doing that like every 6 months, and we would see if our changes in the rhythm of business aligned with Mike's goals. That is where the magic happens. That's where we take this logistics and somewhat administrative work and turn it into this really strategic, impactful work that is adding value to the leader. And, I really believe that's really where the magic of the chief of staff role happens. All right. The next example I have here around kind of a tool that supports the business planning in that environment was something that I called a travel week by week view. And I'll pop down to that here. The problem that we found was that our leader was busy traveling a lot. And often our sales team didn't know where he was going, which was a problem because our leader needs to be meeting with key stakeholders in those cities, potentially like major company CEOs, and our sales team didn't know that he was there. So we had to solve for that problem in a way that was efficient, operational, and could like scale and be something that a tool that we updated. So another tool that was built is this example, President's week by week, travel week by week. We updated this, we had it running, monthly, we'd update it weekly, we shared it with the sales team. That's a great example of something that you identify in your business as a problem, might not be the same problem, but you build a tool to provide visibility and clarity for the purpose of adding value and like major business impact of potentially your leader meeting with important stakeholders. I also noticed really early on that my leader was just not prepared for what he was walking into. Maybe it was like an all hands meeting or a sales meeting or like meeting with external stakeholders or a presentation or whatever it might be. I realized that we did not have a really solid brief process for writing and creating briefs. And I knew that I didn't have the time to dedicate to writing briefs for his 27 meetings every day, but I knew that it was critical to the business that he was prepared for every single thing he walked into. And by the way, that people were prepared to meet with him as well. So what I had to do, and what's very important as a chief of staff is to build strong relationships early on, make sure that you're meeting with everybody on your leader's direct report team consistently. Maybe it's monthly, maybe it's every other month. Make sure that you're understanding who the key people are of your direct reports on their team. Those are often like the chief of staff type folks that might be under different titles, like director of operations for the sales VP. Okay, that guy's actually the one writing the sales VP's decks and strategy and the person that I work with the most. He's essentially the chief of staff for that sales VP. Building those relationships and identifying those key people early on is only going to help you tremendously in a chief of staff role. So back to the example, I realized that we really didn't have a solid brief process. Once in a while, maybe somebody on the sales team would put a brief in front of my president's eyes, but other than that, we didn't have a solid brief process. I already had a relationship with the sales director under the VP of sales. And he was a buddy. He had became a buddy. It was, intentional networking, and we just got along great. And him and I were able to collaborate and consider how do we work together to ensure that like Mike is prepared for everything in the business. We close more deals and the business is just better as a whole. We ended up putting a process together that worked back like 4 weeks. We would, and I'll talk through this secondary tool here in a minute, but putting a process together that built a tool where we could see all of Mike's engagements. We could check in with Mike about what he felt he needed a brief for. And then we would kick off the process 4 weeks early. We'd title the brief, it'd have a bunch of missing information. We'd send it to the sales team with a deadline for when we needed it back. The sales team would send it back. Our EA would populate the rest of the information, the logistics, anything else that's like more calendar related on Mike's schedule. My chief of staff team, me or someone on my team, we would review it, make sure it was ready to go, and we would make sure that Mike had a brief like a day or two before the important session coming up. However, before we could build a brief process where there were other people doing it and it was operationalized, I was the one building the briefs. I built the template. I created the process. I identified the people who are going to be completing the briefs. I had to get buy-in from the sales team of adding a bit of extra work and why that's helpful to them and close deals for them. I had to get buy-in from our EA for a bit of additional work, but work that she understood was important and that she, wanted to be a part of, which was awesome. And then we implemented the process to make sure that it was operationalized, and we checked in often. Even before we could create a brief process, though, we had to figure out how do we even see what the most important engagements are that are happening on Mike's calendar. I don't believe that chiefs of staff need any kind of edit access to their leader's calendar. I think that view access is perfect, but view access is necessary. With that, it's still like a bunch of craziness, right? When you look at a calendar, everyone on the phone's like, yep, okay, crazy. It wasn't working well. Just look at the calendar and figure out what we needed briefs for. We needed to present Mike's calendar to him and get sign off from him on what he needed a little extra prep for. That tool that we built, let's see if I can find it here. I call the engagement pipeline. We essentially built this, I think, every week, updated it consistently, had a lot of help from the EA once we operationalized the process. And this is the tool that we showed Mike every week, and we assumed or confirmed that he needed a brief, who was going to lead the brief process, when it was going to be delivered, key details for Mike on his engagements. Now, what the working team used looked much different and probably a lot less pretty and a lot more in process than the view we presented to our leader. Our working team, we eventually moved all of this to, can't remember if it was Asana or project management platform, but we eventually moved all that into a platform. But this is where we started, which is essentially just like a planning tool where we logged all of his upcoming engagements. We flagged them when they were priority, and then we got to work on determining the details. And for the most important engagements, we would get those in front of Mike and confirm that he needed a brief. That process had to happen way earlier than our actual brief process, so that we knew what we had to put a brief together for. All right. At this point, where I was building engagement pipelines and we were really tracking the leaders' engagements, another tool we'd created was an engagement intake process. I don't have a slide for that to show you, but essentially a process where, okay, we're being asked 12 times a week for Mike to participate in something. How do we filter these out for him and make a recommendation of yes, you should participate, or no, you should not participate? And for us, that came down to identifying like 5 different categories of importance. For example, number of people, benefit to the brand, where it was located, the team that he'd be presenting to and its importance and overlap with our team. We, built these 5 categories of kind of importance, and we would rate the item that came in from 1 to 10 of how we felt it kind of landed across those 4 important categories. We would then very simply take that piece of paper to Mike in our weekly meetings, and we'd say, hey, our threshold for a definite yes is 40 and up. This is a 35. So we recommend that you don't participate, but hey, here's the details if you want to override that. We always gave him the option. We sometimes wouldn't know if he's like, oh, that's my friend, I golf with them, and I said I would do this. Okay, great. We'll get you ready for it. That is the process we built for engagement intake. Now, what I was going to share that I'll share now is over this time, by the time that we'd started this engagement process, the intake, the engagement pipeline, and the back end engagement tracking, I had a team of like 3 or 4 on my team. And I was really privileged in this chief of staff role to be able to grow my team to support the business. And this is how I did that. As I mentioned, I started with back office, started with the tools I've been showing you, the rhythm of business and the calendar and the visibility tools for the executive team and preparing my leader. And then I realized that I need to go solve some different problems. So every month or 2, I would take a slide with my organization, my team, and my role and my responsibilities mapped out on it to my leader and say, here's what I want to start doing. This is the next thing I want to solve for. I want to hire someone to run business planning. And this is how I want it to look. And this is the responsibilities I want him to participate in or her to participate in so that I can go do this. And I was given a yes, I think every time. It was kind of that like, this is what we need. This is what it's going to do. It's kind of hard to say no to. And thankfully we had the resources at the time where I was getting yeses. So I did that. Every few months, we hired somebody to lead the business planning, the person that was in a lot of those sessions, and that would manage follow-ups and ensuring people are prepared when they show up and the continuity across the repeating sessions, the tools that provide visibility at times during the sessions. I had somebody lead that. And then I hired somebody to lead president engagements, and they ran this whole process of intake and the back end working team management, and the recommendations to the leader. And then I continued to do that for role after role, every time we identified opportunities. Now, a lot of people will kind of relate to this, but sometimes you assume a big company has like all their departments are really big and robust and that you're well resourced. We were not super well resourced in the HR world of our business. We had 5,000 employees. Our group was about $12 billion, $14 billion business. And we had just a couple HR folks really who were responsible for those big things that happen on teams. And they did such a good job. They worked so hard, but my team identified that there was a lot of opportunity when it came to employee culture and listening to our teams. And that's what we focused on. So I hired a few people to support employee culture. And we considered things like putting newsletters together and recognition and what that looked like. And company swag, T-Mobile's big on company swag. And what did all those things look like? And again, how did I solve those problems? How did I realize there were these problems? The chief of staff is ideally like responsible to cascade that leader's vision down, but also bubble that employee culture up to the leadership team to tell the hard truths, to bring those things up in meetings and all of it. Okay, but how do you do that, right? What we did is we, could tell that there was some potential for improvement, and we put a survey together outside of the company surveys that already take place. The quarterly surveys that are company-wide. We put a survey together for all of our folks, and we asked key questions about things we wanted to learn and wanted to know, and what employees wanted, and what folks were going through at the time. This was deep COVID time and a lot going on at big and small companies. We took all that information from our employees and we put it into an analysis presentation with a lot of data. And then we saw the key themes. I presented those key themes to the leadership team on, my leader's team and to my leader. And we recommended some changes, and we recommended some cool new things to do, like put an employee newsletter together to help cascade Mike's vision. So that's another example of sort of a tool and a problem to solve based on employee culture, but more so based on, what are the needs of your team? What are your resources like? I know I'm speaking from a place where we had resources and I could hire support and all of the things. In smaller companies, that chief of staff is going to be doing it all. And you're going to have to be fiercely prioritizing what you're getting into. But I would challenge those folks on this call to consider like how even more important it is that you do not go super, super deep on something and that you try to stay or pull back to that 10,000 foot view so that you can see the problems that might need to be solved over here that you would totally have missed if you were deep in a finance project. And with that comes the how do you articulate the need and make those recommendations and speak the language of your leader. And data helps. Soft side data helps. I'm hearing X, Y, and Z. I'd like to do this. And then truly making a recommendation that's very easy for a leader to say yes to. You've already done the work. You've already done the analysis. You're ready to go. That is a lot easier for a leader to say yes to than, hey, we have this problem to solve. Can we solve it? They don't have time for that. There's 75 other problems, and some of them might not even be on your radar. So I would, really, really want people to take from this call, like the power of making strategic recommendations based on what you know about the business. All right, a couple other things. Let me see if I have anything else in here to share. I think the last slide that I will share is a slide that our Nova folks will be familiar with. We do a really fun exercise in the course where folks have to listen to a leader speak for 5 minutes and just capture anything and everything that leader is saying and turn it into this executive project management approach, this slide. And that looks like this here. It's another kind of project management slide. Actually, that's a brief tracking document. Let's see if I have engagements. I might not have that in here. It looks very, very similar to one of these slides. Essentially, the title is President's Radar. And I'm going to stop sharing. And on this slide and in this practice, let me tell you the story about how I built this. As we all know, that leader's back office is very, very chaotic. There's a lot of ideas being thrown at everybody on the team from the business leader, and it's hard to keep up. Now, what I feel deeply is that our leaders need to stay in that visionary space. We want them to have a million ideas all the time. I'm going to minimize my chat preview. We want our leaders to throw out millions of ideas, but the responsibility of the chief of staff is to capture them all, to have a place for things to land, to help everything stay organized and on track, to potentially track follow-ups and understand who on the team is leading what, and to potentially lead some of those initiatives themselves, and to help the leader prioritize what can and cannot happen based on all the other initiatives in the business. So I had realized on my team that I had a visionary leader like this who had a lot of incredible ideas all the time, a lot of ideas that did go to direct reports on his team, like, oh, perfect, that goes to marketing. Perfect, that goes to sales, that goes to HR. But also a lot of initiatives that didn't have anywhere to land or they weren't baked enough yet to go anywhere else. That's where I saw the opportunity for me to step in. I approached my leader and said, hey, I would love to have a download session with you, like let's say quarterly, where we spend 60 to 90 minutes together and I just absorb and listen to everything on your mind, anything and everything that you're thinking about. And that's what we did. He went a million directions over 90 minutes and idea after idea after idea. And I turned that into a slide or tool called the President's Radar. And categorized items, talked about which leader was responsible or could be responsible for what, which items haven't been started yet, what I could potentially lead, and where we were at with things. And then it was a tool for me to show and kind of be a mirror back to my leader, which essentially was, hey, you've got 30 ideas in 30 days. Like, we can do 5. What are they? And it was really, really hard for him, but we had to prioritize pretty fiercely. Like, then we gave a number 1, a number 2, and a number 3 based on priority to all the items because he couldn't rank anything lower than a priority level 3. And that really helped us. And I kept this President's Radar slide updated. We talked about it in our one-on-ones. We moved, items to people on teams that were leading those, those initiatives. I took control over some of them. It's another example of, hey, I'm sitting here hearing a lot of things. What are the themes that I'm hearing? What's my leader talking about a lot? What are the people on his team talking about a lot? What are they having trouble with? How do I help my leader be more prepared, provide better visibility? What areas of the business can improve? A lot of that comes from reflection, documentation, and then understanding current state so that you can make recommendations to improve the business. Our rhythm of business slides that I showed you early on looked a lot different 6 months in. Mike made some changes. I recommended changes, and we implemented them. He ended up removing one-on-ones with everybody on his team and asked them just to call him when they needed to call him and set up a window of time for when he could accept calls every day. And that really helped us move the needle from kind of more tactical time to more strategic time. Now, this is a lot of kind of how do you approach the role early. I'll speak briefly, so we won't get to Q&A today, but I'll speak briefly about other problems that I helped solve as I was further along in the business and after his back office was set up. We worked through things like an org chart process very early on. Again, not something a chief of staff should or really is responsible for, but hey, our team needed it, and our team needed it for a lot of different reasons. So I worked with some people to implement a process, figured out who was going to take it on every month. The EAs end up updating it on the 30th of every month, and then they send it around. Not a process my team had to deal with too much, but a situation where we needed to come in and solve. I was responsible, and I think a lot of chiefs of staff and a lot of, strong generalists were involved in return to office post-COVID. Hey, where else is it going to land? Similar to now AI policy. Where else is it going to land? We don't have a chief AI officer yet. Most companies don't yet. Where are those projects going to land? I led projects like that. We're in a new building with, literally new builds and new teams, and we're coming back after months out of the office. And how do we do that? How do we drive engagement? Where are people going to sit? How do we check in with people? Like a full, widespread, multi-pronged approach to a very important initiative that affected every single part of the business. I led projects like that. I led projects like improving the QBR process, the quarterly business review process. My leader was sitting there for like 2 days, I think, early on, maybe like 6 months or 9 months into my role. And he was like, this is just not efficient. I keep having to leave and take calls. Like, why am I sitting here? I put a process together to help figure out how that information was going to get to him, which leaders were going to be sitting there, how the QBR process can be streamlined so that it's easier to digest for him, making sure that all the slides are more similar, that they all have what he's looking for on them. Again, a project that affects a lot of different teams, but the biggest way it affects my leader. The last example is those company priorities that a lot of businesses have their senior leadership team take one and lead one. My team, we had like 4 or 5 of the 12 company priorities within our team, and we had to figure out a way to update our priorities every month and meet on them and trickle the cascade down into the day-to-day of our business, present them. Before we had a process, we were just sort of flying through it. And I put a process together where we had the meetings and the slide updates, and it was, the strategic recommendations to change, like what do those updates look like? And then how do we present that business externally outside of our team? So a lot of information today. It is the top of the hour. I hope this was helpful to you. The templates that I shared, those are deep within our Nova Chief of Staff course. We walk through a lot of them, exactly how to do the things that I showed you that I built. So please come check us out, novachiefofstaff.com. We're running a summer sale, $350 off. We never discount, we never promote. It's a one-time a year thing. So enroll with us if you want to get a little more practice doing the things that I talked about today. The template pack just alone we also sell that, but it's a higher price because we really recommend people go through the full experience of the course versus just the templates. Again, because it's just the what, not the how. And we believe deeply that hands-on practice leads to building confidence and the ability to say, I can do this and I'm ready. So I hope this was helpful. It was a different format than normal. And look forward to seeing you on the next one. Everybody have a good day. Thanks for being here.